So, a very good afternoon, everybody. And today, as a part of our thematic study of this novel, we want to discuss the theme of historification of myth and mythification of history in Gun Island. Yesterday, we dealt with the theme of etymology or etymological mystery in the novel, and today we want to see this theme. So, first of all, I want to ask you that what do you understand by myth? We know that there is an interesting myth in Gun Island around which the entire novel is uh, narrated, and that is about Mansa Devi, a gun merchant, the shrine that we see. And the very story of Gun Island also begins when Dinanath is listening the story of this myth from Nilima Bose. And that is where the entire narration begins here. So, how do we look at this concept of myth, and then we see how it works with historification of myth and mythification of history? Yes, anybody would like to say anything, that any ideas coming in your mind regarding this theme? Yes, so whatever you imagine or think, you can. Yes. Yes.
So the novel itself is a journey of finding historical basis of a myth of gun version, and he demonstrates the joint power of imagination and discovery both. In Gun Island, past is recalled to us as a beast that haunt the present time, and in the novel Gun Island it is evidence as a historical facts and scientific truths such as climate change, but the form of structure of the narrative resembles a myth. It is filled with supernatural elements and prophetic visions of the future. The protagonist Dean seems to be hunted and chased by ghosts of Corn Merchant and Mansadevi. Characters such as Tipu and Rafi seem to be undergoing the cycle of rebirth, and the character of Chinta acts as a wise sage and guide of our hero, Dean fighting the truth behind the story of Corn Merchant. But after working on the history, they came to know that gun merchant is not a merchant who was dealing with a gun, but is a merchant who visited Venice.
Okay, fine. So we get to know that there is the myth which governs the entire narrative, and it is full of lot many uncanny things, unrealistic, magical, mystical kind of things also is governing the thing. And later on, we get a rather scientific explanation of the myth. We tend to get a kind of a scientific explanation of the myth. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else still? Yes.
When Dean and Jinta talks about climate change, at that time, uh, Dean tells the story of Mansa Devi and gun merchant to Chinta. So Chinta said that it is not a myth, but it is a history, and maybe that was real. This event were happened in past. Yeah, she explained to Dean that what happened when gun merchant was offered by Mansadev that she tell him that become my devotee, but the merchant denies, and for that Mansa Devi give him punishment. So, to escape from that punishment, gun merchant went to island called Banduki Sadgar. So Chinta said that it was reference of Venice because the word in Arabic language used for Venice is Benedict, and it became Al Bandikia, and it was a reference of gun. Gun means here not weapons like gun, but it is the reference of Venice, and gun merchant went there, but Mansa Devi captured him there also. One merchant went to the another island, and that island name was the land of palm sugar candy. And uh, Sinta said that give me the Bengali name of that word. So Dean said that it called Tal Mishra Desh. And Chinta explained that Desh means country, and Tal means kind of a palm tree, and that produces sugar syrup. And sugar candy is Misri. So Chinta said that the Misri is Arabic word and it is used for Egypt. So that island was reference of Egypt, and maybe the merchant was went Egypt. As we Mansa Devi captured him there also. So from that island he goes to another island, and this island was land of Karchi. And the Bengali word for this is Rumali Desh. And Chinta explained that it is used for Rumalia history, and this place is now in Turkey. So this Rumali Desh is reference of Turkey. So the gun merchant went to Turkey, but Mansa Devi captured him there also, and to escape from there, he went to the another island, and during that time he was captured by pirates, and pirates and Captain Elias saved the merchant, and that place was known as Island of Chains. So Jinta explained that it was Bengali word for that place is Shikolbi, and it is a reference of Sicily, and now it is Sicily. So at last, this island of chains is a reference of Sicily. So in this way, Chinta explained that it was not a myth, but it is history, and that was really happened in past.
Okay, so a good point of connection that we see here, that what is given in a legend with a very interesting names or fancy names or fairy tale names which are given in the myth, they might be historically correct locations or historically correct places also. So as we go by that myth to see that how the history has been mythified in that, and so the myth which speaks about this shrine, for example, the shrine had these three symbols which we have seen, and these three symbols mythically seems to be, for example, the first one seems to be like a hooded snake and the symbol of gun. So mythically it seems to be so, but then we realize that it is the alphabet in Hebrew language, and which stands for Elias's identity. Yes. Then the same way, the another one also seems to be a curious structure, though it says island within the island, kind of an idea that gets represented in that, and that becomes Gito. Historical location is Gito. Island within the island seems to be a very curious place. And the third one was about spider, the spider's identity, which earlier people thought that this must be arms, this must be circle and the arms there. Now island within the island, which is for obviously for for making of the bullets, for example, foundry is also located within the island. So this image can also be for that also, but we come to know that this is for spider. The spider was something which was venomous, poisonous, and this gun merchant was perhaps beaten by the spider also there. So that is there. So in this way, we find that the entire myth is actually a history. It is a history. But when the history is narrated, language has changed. What has changed? Language has changed. Now that language, today when we read that, seems to be fanciful. So we think that the myth is a lie. Myth do not have a truth. This is an imaginary story for children. That is what we think. Now in this novel, Amitav Ghosh wants to say or prove that this myth actually here is a history. It is not an imaginary thing. And so not only the verbal interpretation is given here, not only the verbal interpretation of the myth, but also historical locations are mentioned, and not only mentioned, but there is an actual journey also. There is an actual journey also. So our protagonist, that is Dinanath, actually travels across all those places where maybe in 17th century, as the other events about fire, plague, and that connect the dots, and it seems that this journey of Banduki Saudagar might have happened in 17th century, around 1630s exactly, to speak that. These are all interpretations of Chinta that is given. So it is not coming from a very old time. It is just coming from a few centuries ahead. Just a few centuries ahead only. From there, this story is coming. So it is very near in the history. And all those places are even today existing. So Dinanath is traveling across that. He is going to Sundarban, to the place where the shrine is there. Even there today also there is cobra is there, and obviously it is not surprising to find cobra or poisonous snakes in India or in many parts of the world. Everywhere we find some form of snakes or reptiles. They exist on nook and corner of earth. Everywhere they are there. That's why even in a tiny island of Crete, also there were snake goddesses. We have seen the statues of that civilization. So everywhere it located. So it is not surprising to find a cobra at that site. From there he goes to Venice also. He visits Gito also in the Venice, and then when he travels across the land, he passes through Sicily and other parts also. So this myth is a real history. That is what it proves, and not only a kind of a history which is dead, but it is something that is alive. The history that is alive, and it is with us also. Now, history alive with us. How can we say that history is alive with us? Because the myth tries to say that he was captured by pirates as a slave. Our gun merchant, that is Banduki Saudagar, was captured by pirates as a slave, and then he was sold in the slave market. So what parallel do you find about that today? What is the parallel? That, well, people will say that we don't have slave trades now. We don't sell and purchase human beings now. That is what normally people will say. But then Amitav Ghosh draws our attention to human trafficking. Human trafficking, where how large number of human beings are in a way sold and purchased. In that way they are sold and purchased. So, and then their life also is as terrible as those slaves. So that journey of Tipu and Rafi, and the journey of Bilal and Kabir in the novel comes as an example that even the slave trade is existing, but in a different way. So the myth is not a myth, it is a history, and we are still living a part of that history. That part is still lived by us in 21st century also. So that is the aspect of what we can see and study in this point. Anybody else, any other point to add here? In this point, any other arguments to be given or anything you would like to add here? Anybody? Okay, so after making this point clear, now we want to see that what are other ways of looking uh, at the myth. What are other ways, and how those tools of looking at a myth can be useful even in this novel. How those things can be useful even in this novel. So for example, the question that obviously comes when we study myth is this also, that are myths subtle codes that contain some universal truth? Well, here for Amitav Ghosh, the concern is not universal truth. But what is the concern here? Here the concern is historical truth. And you don't want to go back into universe 1,000 years back or 2,000, 3,000 years back. But you just want to take a few hundred years back. Just a few hundred years back, because we do live on the earth where just 300 years back, just 300 years back, people who lived here, including all our forefathers, our own parents and grandparents and their grandparents and their grandparents, they all believed that earth is static. And this all objects in the universe, they are not moving. That is what people used to believe just 300 years down the line. And today we know that everything is moving. Nothing is static in universe. Today we know that everything is constantly moving, and now that is not surprising us, because when we walk on the earth, we should be surprised that those scientists are telling that earth is moving, but I don't feel that. Where is earth moving? That surprise should be there, because if we have that shock or surprise or a question, we will try to investigate that why it is not happening, why I don't feel the movement of the earth as such. You can't say that the wind is the reason that we are moving, the earth is moving. It is not, because sometimes there is wind, sometimes there are no wind. Sometimes there are heavy tornadoes and cyclones. Sometimes it is absolutely silence. So that all is not an answer of to understand. So our lived experience goes against what our science is telling us, what our science is trying to tell us. So, but that is the reality, that on the same earth we live, just 300 years down the line, people had a different way of looking at those things, which obviously tells that what are our truths may not be truths also. Whatever we think as this is the truth may also not be the truth. 300 years down the line, the people may come and they say that, well, we used to believe in all those kinds of things. Maybe we don't know how those things can be seen also. So, universal truths, do myths contain universal truths? Well, yes, to a greater extent in one or the other ways. But Amitav Ghosh is not concerned as such in those universal truths, rather than the historical truths, which is more concerned. And his concern also is very specific in terms of why do we want to understand this historical truth, or what the myths are trying to say. His focus is very much on climate change. So he will come down again to climate change. Why this all thing? So you don't want to believe that there is a God or a divine power, and through snakes or poisonous objects or through tornadoes or through this hailstorm or fire, it is operating. The divine power is operating through all these kinds of things. It is the third netra of the divine Lord Shiv, and it keeps on opening it time and again, and we feel tsunami and several such kind of a thing. No, that is not what he is looking for. He just want to see that climate change is a kind of a reality which we are denying. Large number of people are in mode of denial of that. So that is his concern, which obviously is connected with this book, The Great Derangement, where he speaks about those things. So we'll try to conclude our discussion with reading of some passages from this book when we see this. So not universal truth, but we can say yes, there are universal truths coded in the myth, but here our concern is what kind of historical truth is coded in the myth. Are they a window on the deep recesses of a particular culture? Yeah, well, yes, again, in context of Amitav Ghosh, yes, they are a window to look into the deep recesses of a particular culture. And here, this boundary of particular culture is widening a lot. So it is not Western culture or Eastern culture. It's not limited to Indian culture or the culture of Sundarbans only, Bengali culture, not only there. But the way he identifies one place from India, which is on the border of Bangladesh and India, so even a smaller country like Bangladesh also is a part along with a larger country like India, and with that even a very advanced form of a country coming from Europe, from a very advanced country like Venice, also becomes a part of that. So, and then not only that, he takes us to Los Angeles and the fires of Los Angeles, California, wildfires in America also. A beach in America also has a serpent, and it bites a dog and dog dies. So he takes a very wide range. So for him, in this capacity, the culture is not east or west, not those demarcation, but a culture of earth, or the inhabitants of the earth. They all have one culture, and these inhabitants are not only humans. It includes humans, the dolphins, uh, and all this living beings, spider, dogs, serpents, they all become a part of this culture, which is what he is perhaps trying to speak of. Are they just entertaining stories that people like to tell over and over? Well, if Nilima Bose is telling a story to Dinanath, it is not a simple children's story. And if it is a children's story, then Nilima Bose will not insist, and Kannai Dutt will not tell that you meet our auntie and auntie wants to talk with you, and somebody coming from America who is a PhD scholar in an American university is coming down the line, and some old aunt is telling a story about Mansa Devi and about serpent and snake and Bandhuki Sodagar. Now it is not a child's play. It is not a children's story, obviously there. So the myth which are used for children's or बच्चों को बहकाने के लिए, small stories that are there, but well, if it is told by Nilima Bose to Dinanath, then it is not so. It has to be taken in a much serious way also. So this is how we question the myth, how we look at the myth. And then how can we study myth? What are those academic tools to study myth? So 4 tools we can get to study, and we will very briefly see who are the pioneers of these tools, and then 2 more viewpoints we will try to see, and around all this 4 plus 2 we will try to locate our narration of myth and historification of myth in around all those things. So 4 tools, first of all, are functionalism, structuralism, psychoanalysis, and myth and ritual. Now in these 4 tools, first of all, who are those pioneers who gave these ideas to us? And well, these are the things which we can use for any study of myth. Anyway, when we are trying to look at a myth or a legend in whatever capacity, how we try to look at this. Historification of myth in Gun Island that we see. So the tools which we are seeing, functionalism, for example, and functionalism comes from Bronislaw Kasper Malinowski. Yes, functionalism. This we'll see what we see there. Second one, structuralism. Structuralism we have seen as a part of our study also, Claude Lévi-Strauss. Structuralism. Then the third one is psychoanalysis. Freud. Okay? Okay. Psychoanalysis, Freud. And fourth one is myth and ritual. Yes? Fourth part is myth and ritual, and that comes from Emil Durkheim. And Jane Harrison. Yes, Jane Harrison. So, the four aspects of looking at a myth coming from the thinkers like Malinowski, who speaks about functionalism. And the idea is that what function does a myth serve in a society or in a culture? What is the function of that myth? So he would give an example to say that the myths are there to establish some kinds of accepted truths or to legitimize some kinds of behavior, which is collectively, culturally done by everybody. If you remember last time when we were talking about Westland, we referred to functionalism in identifying universal human laws. In that we are seeing, and we referred to one example of xenia. Greek xenia means hospitality. Hospitality means hospitality. Yes. To whom? To guests. Yes. To guests. Yajman Giri. Yajman Mehman, that Yajman Giri, that is hospitality. So that is xenia. So it says that hospitality is a very old kind of a cultural trait which is being legitimized through myth. So when we read Ulysses, Homer's